A huge thank you to Lomography for sending me this camera to try out. This little guy is the Lomo ActionSampler, a point-and-shoot camera with a pretty unique feature. Instead of your generic one lens setup, the Lomo ActionSampler knocks the goalpost away and has 4 different lenses. Each of these lenses take their own image in a burst of a second, which allows you to capture motion in your imagery. Hence the name, the Lomo ActionSampler. Taking regular 35mm film, this camera allows you to capture bursts of motion picture all from one button. Lomography UK were actually kind enough to send this camera to me to try out and a couple rolls of their experimental film. So today I'm going to be capturing some funky lo-fi motion on Lomography film. The first roll I'd be shooting was Lomo Purple, a pretty unique colour negative film that switches the blue and green channels around, creating this purple overcast on all the images. Now, I wouldn't be travelling alone for this video either. Friend of the channel Storm would be accompanying me on my shenanigans, making her own video as well, which you should definitely check out her channel. We headed to Preston Park Rock Gardens in Brighton, which was somewhere I'd never been before. Completely ignoring the bad framing, my finger being in frame here, this isn't a bad shot, but this one's a lot better. Obviously having 4 lenses, this camera's purpose is to capture motion, so landscapes like this don't really do much justice to the camera. This is the perfect frame showing motion, a guy on a jog. With the 4 frames you can create a very short animation, which I think is really charming and lo-fi. There's a really nice aesthetic to it. Get a little self-portrait. I reckon that was cool as fuck. And I was not wrong, this image is so nice. Something about like the 4 border frame, it's not a diptych, it's like a polytych or whatever you call a 4 framed piece of art movement. Just something about the 4 frames and the repeated pattern of me, I think it really works well as a self-portrait. I got a fair few certified bangers while heading to the rock gardens itself. This is a nice landscape with some people well framed centrally. And I really like this one with the dog walking, which works really well as an animation. I also noticed some of these images have a really nice bloom to them, and I don't know whether that's because of the cheap plastic lens on the camera, which has no hate to whatsoever, or just the way Lomo Purple is exposed, being an ISO film stock that can be shot between 100 to 400, but that kind of blooming effect in the highlights I absolutely love. The leaves are cool, I want to take photos of them. We finally arrived at the rock garden where I took this surreal image. This image is so cool. Like, realistically, it's just a very boring generic frame, but due to the 4-piece framing, and it being very lo-fi and hard to tell what's going on, it almost looks like an abstract piece of imagery NASA would have released, something of like a galaxy or a nebula.
I don't think you'd survive in Wales.
I'd love to take some images down there, but... Ignoring the camera strap that's obscuring half of these images, the view from this elevation is so nice. It was a shame there were some people down at the pond taking images, but I can't really complain, that's exactly what I'm doing as well. I guess they add scale to the image if the bench wasn't doing that already. I also took this frame of Storm taking an image as well, which I think came out really well. And again, there's a nice lo-fi motion to it. We stumbled upon this really cute waterfall which I had to get a picture of. And the animation is just so nice and so lo-fi. I know I'm using that buzzword a lot, but there's no other way to describe it. This is probably one of the favourite images or animations, whatever you want to call them, that I took this whole video because it's just so gritty and nice. Moving on from the waterfall, all the images around this area were shot in lower light, so they are a bit underexposed. And when you're dealing with 1/4 of a frame anyway, it's kind of hard to tell what's in some of the images, but I still think some of them look nice. We headed down to the pond we saw earlier from the elevation. These steps looked incredible, and I got probably one of my favourite images here. Oh my fucking god! After this point I was pretty much done with my role, pretty content that I had taken some good images. I waited for Storm to finish shooting too, and she got some pretty good images that you should definitely check out. This role of Lomo Palpable hadn't really focused too much on motion, it was more just exploring the camera itself, so for my next role, which was a role of Lomography Color 92, I wanted to go really into the motion. Lomo Color 92 is a more regular film stock but still has a few experimental features. It aims to be a more nostalgic kind of vintage film look, while already being on film, leaning more into cooler blue shades with pops of vibrant red, and from the images I took, I definitely like it. To really lean into the motion in this role, I knew I had to take out this camera while skating. It being just a basic point and shoot, it's very easy to use while on a skateboard, and with the fast-paced movement of the skateboard, I knew I could probably get some pretty cool looking images. I headed out into the streets of Brighton with one motto in mind: shoot fast, think later. Most of the frames I took while skating were not composed whatsoever, it was just in the moment taking the image. Honestly as well, it's probably the most fun I've had using a point and shoot in a very long time because it just changed my way of thinking when I was shooting. I was intentionally looking for motion in my photography instead of just whatever I would normally be looking for, and it really kept me on my edge, kind of thinking, what could I do next? How can I explore motion in a different way? I absolutely adore this self-portrait I took in the reflection of this office building. I pass this office building every time I go on a skate and I always see people looking at me, so it's just kind of nice to take an image back for once. Eventually I got to the beachfront in Brighton where I got a few more interesting frames. I really like this frame even though it's quite basic. I think it's a good example of the colour reproduction leaning into that more bluish tones. Normally I'm a massive shill for stuff like Kodak Gold because I really like that warm, vibrant feeling, but this is also really nice and I'm really glad I kind of like it. There's a zip line at the beach too where I waited for a few minutes just to get a picture of somebody going down it, and it didn't come out half as good as I thought it was going to be. I carried on heading down Brighton's beachfront until I got to above the lanes, and with Brighton being very busy at this time of year, there was so much motion to capture. This frame I took at Brighton Skate Park is really cool and is a really good example of stuff you can do with this camera and a whole project you could do around it, motion on skateboards. I finished off my roll with a few more missed shots, and you know, after getting my images back, all of them came out really nice. I'm not being very negative this video, I'm quite happy with the images I produced. So, the Lomo ActionSampler, what are my thoughts? I'd definitely say the skateboard and Lomo ActionSampler combo is my favourite thing I've done in so long. I love skateboarding as it is in general, going out listening to music and just having a nice time, cruising around. Then adding a camera into the equation and getting really cool images. What more could I ask for in life? I actually really adore this camera and it's a really good example of what Lomography do for film photography. You know, it's a really basic, easy to use point and shoot that most people can use, but it's also got a really unique feature that most other cameras don't have. At the end of the day, it is definitely a gimmick camera, like it serves a purpose. I also took this camera to Birmingham a few weeks back and got a bit more regular imagery with it, so I'm excited to see what that looks like, but you'll have to wait for another installment of MatTube for that. Would I use this as like an everyday camera? Probably not, but using it was so fun and it's definitely something I want in my arsenal. There is so much creative and unique things you can do with the camera, and it's kind of just got my creative cogs turning, being like, okay, I've seen what I can do now, what else can I do? Push the limits to this motion picture camera. Again, I've got to give a huge thank you to Lomography, specifically Lomography UK, for sending this out for me to use. It has been a really fun experience and it's a camera I've loved using the last few weeks. I also mentioned earlier I would be doing an interview for Lomography too, which I will link in the description below or in the comments if it isn't out when this video is out. If you want to support my channel, like and subscribe as always. Check out my Instagram linked in the description below. I post some pretty cool images there. Thank you for watching as always, and Matt out.